Hello, I'm Tomix9Tomix, and this is my first time making a formal review video like this, so please leave any feedback that you have in the comments. This will be mostly spoiler free except for a few specific sections, which I will warn you about. And there will also be footage played throughout the video that shows various areas of the game, and various mechanics will also be talked about. If you'd like to go into the game completely blind and just want to know my overall opinion about Metro Gravity, well, this is a very good game, and if you like puzzle games, exploration, and rhythm games, you'll have a great time with this game. Now, onto a full review, and thank you. Metro Gravity is a new indie game by a solo dev who goes by Marco Dev. You play as a character named Stephanie in a place called the Halls. You have the ability to change gravity as you wish, which honestly is a pretty mind-blowing mechanic. In a room, you can choose any of the 6 surfaces to stand on, and you get to see the place from a new perspective each time. You explore the halls, solve puzzles, and meet characters, and fight monsters. To compare it to another gameplay loop, the easiest would probably be the 3D Zelda games like Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. Except there's no overworld in this game, it all takes place inside those dungeon-like structures. And so because of that, each dungeon is connected to another dungeon in a Metroidvania-like way. There's different loops, different entrances, different exits, and so on. However, the combat is very different from Zelda and probably any Metroidvania or even any game you've played. Parrying is a key mechanic, except this time it's more themed about music and rhythm. You're expected to learn the rhythm that you need to parry to, and you literally cannot progress in the game without parrying. It's a mandatory mechanic. Throughout the dungeons you will find these spinny eyeball gates that test your parrying skill to a certain beat, and to pass through the gate you need to pass the rhythm test flawlessly. For me, these were pretty tough, but for other people these would probably be pretty easy. And that's an interesting thing about this game's difficulty. If you play an instrument, or understand music well, or maybe just play a lot of rhythm games, you won't struggle with this game. But if you're someone like me, who isn't like that, this game has a massive learning curve, or more specifically, a spike, being the first boss you meet around the 2-hour mark. Until then, most enemies and eye gates are pretty simple. Maybe you'll have some trouble with eye gates, but you'll get through it after a couple attempts. But this boss really raises the battle mechanics to a whole new level. To win the boss, you need to survive. You just need to survive the fight throughout the duration of the song. And while the fight does give you moments of respite and a way to heal, it's still very difficult if you're coming at it with no rhythm game experience. It's pretty relentless. And for me, honestly, even though I completely sucked at the fight, I still really enjoyed it. Fighting the first boss is probably my second favourite moment from the whole game. With every attempt, I felt myself becoming more and more familiar with the fight and getting further and further. It felt really rewarding. It was a nice cycle. And while I was still really bad at the game by the time I beat the fight, I did feel like I got better and I had actually accomplished something. The downside of this difficulty spike is that the first boss ended up probably being the biggest hurdle for me. I played through the rest of the game, and while I did continue to die to the other bosses, I never really felt like I went to another level like I did with the first boss. But part of that is just a consequence of me starting at such a low skill level. All in all though, every boss was a really fun fight, and all of them felt really rewarding to get through. But that first boss will always be special to me. What every boss fight did do consistently was the spectacle, and this is probably my favourite part of the game, or at least what I believe the game does the best. Each boss fight feels like a scene from some awesome movie, and because the fight operates over the course of a song, everything feels really choreographed in a really beautiful way. It's not like a typical action RPG boss fight where you're watching them choose what move they use. It's the same every time. It's orchestrated. And like, for example, maybe after 30 seconds the boss will grab you and shove you through a hole in the wall. Or maybe they'll like summon a giant purple snake that flies through the sky. There's more than just that, that's just like 2 examples, but every boss had something that leaves you in awe. I don't want to spoil all of it, but the final boss in particular is like cinema material. That meme where the guy holds up his hands and he says cinema, it's that. It's really amazing and it really feels like a movie. And the spectacle and beauty of the game extends not just in the boss fights, but into the level design itself. There are various distinct areas throughout the game, and they all have their own motifs. Each will have a sort of hub area with branching paths into puzzle rooms that you need to solve, and I always look forward to seeing what each of these hub rooms look like. They're all constructed in such a beautiful way. The ability to change your perspective of gravity allows you to see the design of those rooms in many different ways, and it just feels so special. No matter which way you look at it, the room will look like a beautiful art piece. It's like rotating the Mona Lisa and seeing something new, but still beautiful. Throughout my time playing the game, I was constantly taking screenshots. It's just that beautiful. In comparison, a lot of other rooms in the game look quite plain, but that's because they do exist as puzzle rooms, and it'd be difficult to make a puzzle that's an art piece without distracting from what puzzle you're trying to solve there and confusing the player. So I do like that they focused on these specific set pieces to make the game stand out. But yeah, about the puzzles, and this is probably where I feel the most conflicted about the game, which is sad because the puzzles are what you'll spend most of your time on when you play this game. At its heart, it is a puzzle game with cool boss fights. And here I'll be a bit more specific about puzzle mechanics, and I will even mention some puzzle solutions. So if you want a completely spoiler-free view of the game, look away, get off the review. I feel conflicted about the puzzles, but it does not ruin the game for me. If everything until now sounded beautiful, still give it a go. So anyway, this game has 3 main tools for you to solve puzzles: a gravity amulet, a red needle, and a wrench. The gravity amulet places a blue beam on the floor, which changes the gravity of objects in its path. The red needle can link 2 objects together, but it also doubles as a grappling hook. If you jump while aiming it and attach to an object in the environment, you will grapple to that object at like a high speed and you can swing around. And then the last one, the wrench, can rotate certain objects. These are all interesting tools, and the game really does do a lot with these. There are more mechanics as you go throughout the game that utilize these tools in new ways. For example, while the red needle is just for binding for objects and grappling hooking, at one point you find batteries, and now you're not just binding objects, but you're binding objects to create a circuit, and now you're trying to power certain objects in the room. And for the wrench, it starts off just turning wheels that opens doors. But at one point you find a seasonal clock, and you can change the seasonal clock to freeze and unfreeze water. It's all really cool and unique, and like, I've played so many puzzle games and so many Zelda games, and so many games like Zelda, but these mechanics still felt new and really inventive. It wasn't like, oh, another long shot, I can go to this chest on the other side of a room. Instead, it was like, I can connect objects and make them pull on each other now, which is something that I haven't seen before. However, unfortunately, the puzzles were about 50-50 on whether they felt satisfying to solve or whether it felt like I stumbled my way into a jank solution. And this is where the subjectivity of my opinion comes into play a bit more. For puzzle games, I personally like a solution that feels like it was there all along, that feels really intuitive, and like if you walk into the room, you can get all the information you need, it's just about putting it together. When you play The Witness and you look at an apple tree, and maybe at first you're like, how the hell am I supposed to figure out what line to draw? But then finally you see it and you're like, oh, how did I miss that? Of course, that makes sense. Same with when you play a game like Portal, like you're stuck in this room moving boxes around, But then eventually you figure it out and you're like, of course I needed a block there instead of that other place. It all kind of clicks at the end. For me, there were a lot of puzzles that didn't click in this game, that didn't really give me that satisfying feeling. The puzzles in Metro Gravity feel more like a sandbox instead of there being one clear solution. There is one intended solution, and you can even ask them at Discord about it, as I have many times, and they'll probably give you the intended solution. But there's also like 3 unintended solutions. And that shouldn't be a problem, you know, it should be fun to find your own unintended solutions. The problem for me is that the 3 unintended solutions seem janky, but then, in my opinion, the intended solution also ends up being just as janky. It doesn't feel clean. I'll go over some specific examples. In this room, you have a scoop, a soccer ball, and a goal. Stephanie comments that the soccer ball doesn't seem to be affected by a gravity beam, so it'll always float up. Solution 1, bind the soccer ball to the object near the scoop, get the ball in the scoop, launch the scoop with the soccer ball in it. If you keep on launching the scoop, the soccer ball will just go into the void, so you need to pull back on the scoop at the last moment, which will launch the soccer ball straight into the goal. Solution 2. If you jump with the red needle, it turns into grapple hook mode, which lets you travel quickly going from lamppost to lamppost. However, if you jump and grapple to the soccer ball, because it's not a fixed object, the soccer ball will now follow you like a dog on the leash. This lets you just walk the ball into the goal, omitting the scoop from the puzzle. Now it should be pretty clear here which one is the intended solution. And this puzzle I actually don't have an issue with, I sort of misled you. But we'll lead into the puzzle I have an issue with after this. I thought this was well done. I think the exploit of carrying a ball into the goal is a funny little unintended solution. Where my problem comes from is that the unintended solution of leading the soccer ball like that isn't an exploit. That is an intended mechanic. There are 2 more soccer ball puzzles after this room, and both of them expect you to jump so that you can grapple the ball to yourself and then lead it around. There are other ways to try to solve the puzzle without using this mechanic, but they are extremely janky and luck-based. So for me, it just feels inconsistent that you do puzzle 1, where the link into the soccer ball is unintended and an exploit, but then puzzle 2 with the soccer ball, with nothing in between using the soccer ball, that is now what you're expected to do. It used to be an unintended mechanic, but now it is the intended solution. One more example is this room, and to be fair, apparently this is supposed to be like the hardest puzzle in the game that hides a good reward, so it's meant to be difficult. But to simplify this and try to get the meat of the puzzle and the meat of my issue with it, throughout the game you solve lots of puzzles with moving blocks and moving balls, and for all of those puzzles you have a reset bell. It's very possible to get the block in a stuck position, and so you hit the bell and it resets it to its starting position. It makes sense. In this puzzle, after some configuring, you end up in this situation. You have the block with 2 blocks on the side, and essentially you want the 2 blocks on the side to be touching each other on top of the sigil without the middle block. There are 2 solutions for this one. For the first solution, each time you stop and start moving the middle cube, the 2 cubes on the side move slightly because of inertia. It requires some trial and error, but you can stop and start the cube enough so that the blocks slide off at the right moment and right distance and land on top of the sigil, facing each other. Solution 2 is to put the middle cube on the wall with the blocks on the side, and then just hit the reset bell. The middle cube will reset, but the side blocks will stay, and they'll go into the correct position and complete the puzzle. For this, solution 2 is the intended solution. And that makes sense because having to wiggle the block around and hope that it slides just the right amount in the right place is very janky and annoying. But also, in my opinion, incorporating the reset button into the puzzle solution just makes it feel like I've exploited the puzzle. It doesn't feel like an intended mechanic. It is, but it's not. or it doesn't feel like it for me. There's no other clean way to solve this puzzle. You have to utilize the reset button. For me, it feels like if you were playing like Dark Souls and there's some weird item that you could only get by walking into a room, waiting for the door to lock, and then quitting out to the main menu, and then reloading so you're now outside the locked door. It doesn't feel intentional, it feels like I'm breaking the game. These are just two examples, but there are other puzzles that left me feeling a similar way throughout the game. Not really feeling satisfied, not getting that aha moment, but just feeling like I janked it up and stumbled my way through it. But like is the nature of this gravity warping game, it really does depend on your perspective. I sound quite harsh here, but I also do understand that me not being satisfied by the puzzles is subjective. And while I view it this way, as unsatisfying, another person could look at it and see a wonderful sandbox, where it really feels like you're inventing your solutions, taking advantage of every bit of the physics engine. So I imagine for someone like that, they could find great satisfaction in solving these puzzles. This really is just my view, and if you've played the game, I'd be curious to know what you think about the puzzles too. And that being said, there were also plenty of other puzzles that left me feeling very satisfied. This wasn't a constant problem for me, it just came up more than I would have liked. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Metro Gravity. I'm sorry if it sounded a bit negative towards the end. Do not get it twisted, I really did enjoy this game. This is going to be a very special game for me that's going to stay with me for a long time. My first night after playing it, I literally couldn't sleep because I was just thinking about playing more. Any negative nitpick I have about the puzzles is heavily outweighed by the amazing spectacle that it presents. If this sounds like your kind of game, give it a try. It's only $13 US, and Lord knows we need to support our indie devs more than we do. Thank you for watching, and I hope I can make more reviews like this in the future. Thank you.